don't have to memorize that, just give us a big number. Who can tell me, besides y'all that have attended my training, who actually, scratch that for a moment. Forgot something, Captain Swanson. Who knows who Captain Swanson is? Say it loud. Who said that, sir? Right. So everybody say Captain Swanson.
Captain Swanson.
He's the mess surgeon. He's your boss's 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 boss. Did I get that about right? Close enough. So, forgot something he told me to tell you when I do this. So I got to make sure I get your attention. I got to make sure you understand why it is unbelievably important that you get this. Because we haven't got it yet. And I have been saying this since 2012 only because I felt it, but now I know firsthand, when I say we, that refers to Marine leadership, the people you need to train, and medical. We haven't gotten something yet. And I'm going to tell 3 stories, maybe 4, if you laugh hard enough. 3 stories, all designed to get your attention. And it's designed to get your attention so that you clearly understand why we have to sit through 4 hours of this. Hopefully I'm not real boring and I don't bore you to death, and if I start seeing you nod out, I'll either yell or we'll take a break. First story is a combat story about TBI. It's a true story. I'm going to change the names, but you may have even heard the story, and if you have, great. So, young Marine comes back from his 3rd tour. Did I tell that story? So, young Marine comes back from his 3rd tour, combat tour. He has 3 Purple Hearts, all from blasts. You're going to learn the significance of that later. But he had 3 Purple Hearts, and they were 3 loss of consciousness. So he blowed up on 3 separate occasions throughout his time in the Marine Corps. 3 separate occasions, blowed up, knocked out. When he came back from that 3rd tour, they had him and his spouse had orders to the Pentagon. Now that tells us something. The Marine Corps just doesn't send any sergeant to the Pentagon, so he had to have been, his record had to be personally viewed. Somebody looked at it and thought he was a good Marine. Make sense? So he comes back to Camp Lejeune. At Camp Lejeune, his wife, after about 3 weeks of being home, his wife is complaining to everybody. She's complaining to the CO, the XO, the first sergeant, his NCOIC, his OIC. She's complaining to everybody that something's wrong with him. And you probably heard this story before, these types of stories. He's mad all the time, he's angry, he's hollering at us, he can't focus, he doesn't sleep, he can't concentrate, blah, 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 blah. All TBI symptoms. Now, nobody knows if he has TBI yet, but what we do know is that 3 Purple Hearts from blast, and one of them was recent from the last tour he comes back on. He's complaining to everybody, nobody does anything. Eventually, in an inspecting his Marines, he inappropriately touches a female Marine. He inappropriately touches her so bad she hits him. Everybody sees it, so what does the Marine Corps do? We do the Marine Corps thing. What's that mean? And who said that? We NJP'd him. Reduced him from sergeant to lance corporal. Cancel the Pentagon orders. Ship him to Camp Pendleton. He gets to Camp Pendleton. Wait a minute, you heard the story. You can't answer, sir. Just realize that. So cancel the Pentagon orders, ship him to Camp Pendleton. He gets to Camp Pendleton. Now the wife only knows we were a sergeant last week, now we're a lance corporal this week, and we're on our way to Camp Pendleton. She doesn't know the details about why he got reduced. So the wife, they get to Camp Pendleton, MLG. Any MLG? So MLG. He's at MLG, and apparently the adjutant at the MLG figures out the Camp Pendleton, the NJP was done wrong. Something wasn't done right. Marine Corps says they have to promote him back to sergeant. This is like 3 months after he's at Pendleton. They have to promote him back to sergeant. He comes into work one day, a salty-looking lance corporal, and by that afternoon, he's a sergeant. It's like, wow, this guy is really hot. So they promote him back to sergeant, but nobody does anything about his TBI issues. And the way I tell this story, back at Camp Lejeune, there had to have been corpsman that was in his command. There had to have been a medical officer somewhere around there. There for sure was an NCOIC, this is the Marine portion. There was an OIC, and then there was a first sergeant and a company commander that was involved in the NJP. which went at the battalion, because the company doesn't do that type of thing. And then, so there was a sergeant major. I tell this to your Marines. You may have your own story to get their attention, but it applies to you too. There was a sergeant major at the battalion, a CO and an XO. At the battalion, none of them knew enough about TBI to think, maybe this guy needs to be in medical. Maybe running him up the flagpole, he still has to be accountable for his behavior, but maybe he needs help. Nobody figured that out. And at the regiment, nobody at the regiment reviewed it and knew enough to think, why is a sergeant doing stuff like this? And when they interview, or when they, at the office house, he claimed he didn't touch her. He didn't know what happened. That's interesting. So they ship him to Camp Pendleton. He gets to Camp Pendleton. MLG says, Marine Corps says, promote him back. He gets promoted back to sergeant. 6 months after he's a sergeant, in another formation, he does the exact same thing. Inappropriately touches a female Marine in another formation. Now we reduce him to private, we throw him in the brig. And it's at this point where he is in the brig, I hear about it firsthand. I hear about it from the wife, because now the wife is looking for a job, because in case you don't know this yet, if you go to the brig, you don't get paid. And he's got 3 babies under the age of 5. 3 children under the age of 5, and they now need a job. So the wife is trying to get a job, so she's interviewing with me for this job when she learns I'm the TBI guy. She's a smart girl. She apparently had she was suspicious about TBI stuff, so she had Googled it already. And when she learns I'm the TBI subject matter expert here on the West, well, I'm actually a regional guy, so I do this training all up and down California. So Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, everybody. And when she learned that's what I do, she drops the story on me. So everything I just told you is what she told me. And when she got to the part about they promoted him back to sergeant, I didn't believe it. I believed everything up until she said that, because 31 years in the Marine, I never heard, we don't do stuff like that. Even if we knew we were wrong, we're not promoting him back. So I said, but I wanted to hire. So I said, well, who is he with, Mrs. So-and-so? She says, he's with MLG. And she is irate. She is mad. So I go over to the MLG. Me and that MLG Sergeant Major, we were drill instructors together, so I knew exactly who he was. So we go over and we talk. We have a little talk, and I say, so Sergeant Major, tell me about Sergeant so-and-so. Sergeant Major, he's sitting behind his desk, and he puts his hands on his face, and he falls back in his seat. Oh, God, that's the craziest thing I ever seen. I said, what happened? Marine Corps, they reduced him for being a turd. That's what his language was. Back at Camp Lejeune, Sergeant Major knew nothing about TBI, and I wasn't strong enough in what I knew to tell a Sergeant Major something else. So I just listened. So the Sergeant Major tell, and then he said, then he got here, and he does the exact same thing he did at Camp Lejeune. And we had to reduce him, so we're throwing him out. I just listened. Because what I'm thinking is, could this all be TBI related? But I don't feel confident enough to confront the Sergeant Major about it yet. So I go back to the Intrepid. It wasn't Intrepid Spirit then. It was the concussion care clinic on Camp Pendleton where all the TBI specialists were, and I tell them this story. And to a T, anybody know Dr. Stussy, Keith Stussy, retired Navy captain? History. He is the guy that the Marine Corps sent to, you might be the only one with this, and I'm glad I saw this. Does anybody else have this in their package? You shouldn't. This one says what you should know. Yours should say something else. What's yours? Okay, no, good. This was the only one. I need this back, sir. Okay. Now, but everybody look at this. Every one of you need to go back to your unit, go to the DivBig website, and order a stack of these. The one that says what you should know. Why? This is required. If you sit down and you talk to someone about TBI, if you have a suspected potential TBI, this is the educational brochure you are required. What does yours say, man? Yeah, that's different. That's different. I'm going to talk about that later. So this one is the education brochure you're supposed to give to your patient. Now, this is Dr. Keith Stussy. So he became famous in the TBI world because back in the early 2000s, he's the guy the Navy sent to Afghanistan and Iraq to build the concussion care clinics. So that's who he is. So I went back and he ran the concussion care clinic on Camp Pendleton. Now you guys won't use our clinic yet. You're going to use Naval Hospital San Diego, except you two on Pendleton. So I went back and I talked to all the TBI specialists, the neurologists, and they educated me on a couple of things. One, oh yeah, all the symptoms he was exuding can be TBI related. If you injure the prefrontal cortex, it can lead to those things. You're going to learn more about that later. So I'm thinking, wow, we threw this. So what happens next? It gets worse, sir. Lieutenant Commander? Okay, or Major? Navy, Lieutenant Commander. Okay. So he's in the brig. We throw him out. He gets discharged, and I did hire the wife, and I actually hired him. Both of them. So I have a private practice, health coaching practice. I hired both of them, and I knew something was wrong. Because he would give you that stare, PTSD stare, that crazy stare, like, man, he's just like, what is wrong with this guy? And then the wife breaks a leg, they have to move back to Maryland. So they leave. About 4 months, they go back to Maryland. 4 months later, about 2 weeks after they're back, she calls me up crying. He was killed in a car accident. So he got killed in a car accident. This is really gonna be interesting what happens next. And I have no idea if these are connected, but it's a crazy coincidence. She calls me up crying about he was killed in a car accident. And I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do? I can't help her. She's telling me he couldn't get, key point, he couldn't get any help at the, she's ramping and raving because she's pissed. The Marine Corps threw her husband out when he had problems, and he couldn't even go to the VA. Why couldn't he go to the VA?
Dishonorable discharge?
Got less than honorable discharge. So now I tell the story when I do the leadership portion of this. Yeah, the CEO, the sergeant major, the XO of the command didn't know enough about TBI to realize you're going to throw this kid out and he needs help. The medical, there had to have been a corpsman back there somewhere, and I say this now, all you HM2s, if you're it, you got to advocate for your Marines. If you know enough to think, man, this guy might have health issues, mental issues, TBI issues, somebody's got to yell, somebody's got to speak up. But nobody did that at Camp Lejeune, and then when you got to Camp Pendleton, nobody did that here. That's what's running through my mind, and the wife is complaining. He couldn't even get help at the VA. So I just want to get off the phone because I don't know what to tell him. So out of nowhere, I just say, hey, when the coroner does the autopsy, tell the coroner to check his brain for CTE. What's CTE? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's what the NFL got in trouble for. The NFL got, National Football League, they got in trouble for covering up all the little brain injuries players were having. And then committing suicide over it. Now, he didn't commit suicide. He got killed in a hit-and-run accident. So she called me back about 3 weeks later, about a month later, and told me the coroner said he had CTE. Now, the crazy part about that was when I went and told the people, the medical guys in the clinic, we were not buying into CTE yet. Are we buying it now? So, in other words, what Dr. Stussy told me and a couple of the doctors, well, the neurologist, was, nah, being in the military and being exposed to blast can't cause CTE, because that's what we believe then. Do we think anything different now? So we're kind of maybe thinking. What do you think, sir?
I think still a lot of evidence out there to not really think yet.
Right, that's the word. There's a lot of that doesn't make the connection. But you do know some of the evidence that does. So it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Got one side. Anyway, so that's what she said. So I take that back and I share that with the clinic. And everybody is kind of like surprised. And then a crazy coincidence happens. Dr. Bennett Amula comes to Camp Pendleton. Do we know who that is? That's the doctor that the movie Concussion was made about. He was the guy that, did he discover CTE? Yeah, he's the guy that discovered CTE. And he came to Camp Pendleton. He came to Camp Pendleton to do a talk. And everybody was concerned about his talk. Why? He's a pathologist. So he's going to talk about CTE from a dead person's perspective. So I was encouraged to put on a panel discussion with all the medical people on Camp Pendleton so that they were aware that Dr. Amula, while he might have some good stuff, his information comes from a pathology perspective. When anybody here work on dead people? Right, we work on alive people, right? So, but he told me, I have a photo of this, he told me it is African, were you from Africa? Yeah, he said, Nigerian, right? He says, you tell those military doctors CTE cannot happen in the military. Really? So I'm thinking, okay, I'll tell them, but somebody told me you got to stop telling them that. Why? Because there's not enough evidence. So what happens next with this young Marine? I don't know, but I do know this is what happens next in this series of the first story. That was in 2012. So in 2014, the meth surgeon calls me up. Hey, Dr. Pearman, there's an investigation going, and we need you to come answer some questions. So I'm thinking, am I in trouble? Are they investigating me, or they want some? He said, oh, no. It's the General Accounting Office. Why them? I have no idea. The General Accounting Office is investigating the DOD, the military, all the branches. They already did the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. Now it's the Marine Corps side. They're investigating us to see if we are throwing people out of the service when we should be treating them. That's what Captain Zito says. They want to know, is the military throwing people out of the service with TBI and PTSD issues when we may should have been treating them? I said, well, why does that, what does that have to do with me? She says, you're the guy that provides the training to both Marine leadership and medical. And I explained to her, I only provide what the government tells me to provide. She said, that's no problem, you still gotta come. Then I'm trying to get out of this. I'm trying to get out of this. Looking for every excuse I can. So then I throw and I'm a contractor. Contractors are not allowed, period. I'm not even supposed to be talking to you. Marine Corps said it's okay though. Contractors are not allowed at least to talk to this level. No, you can't do that, sir. You're looking at me like, really? No, you got contractors that work for you. They can't talk to higher level government like that. So I roll that by her. She says, I don't care. Do I need to get the legal guys? You have to come down and speak. So I have to call the Defense Health Agency because I can't do it without their approval. So I call my bosses in Washington, and they said, well, you need to get your handler. That's the term I like to say for the military person that oversees me. And at that point, it was Dr. Stussy. So he's like, man, I have time for this behind. So we all go down and we listen to the GAO explain what this was all about. They simply want to know, are we throwing people out? Are you guys making diagnoses and throwing people out, or causing people to be thrown out when they should be treated? Now, I get the great idea to say, yes. What did I say? Who said that? Yes. That is the truth. But I should have kept my mouth shut, sir. No, not really. So I say, yeah, we throw them out. And I don't really know enough other than two things. I do this for the VA also. So this, the TBI stuff, it's the defense. I work for the defense, that's the DOD, and Veterans Grant Review Association. We are the organization that the DOD and the VA decided would oversee kind of yada, 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 TBI stuff. So I know what goes on in the VA. And we get tons of people winding up in the VA with undiagnosed TBI issues. Now, that's not your fault. They just didn't tell you. It could be your fault because you didn't do the training to tell them to tell you. Did y'all get that? Do I need to say it again? If you got it, say I got it. Yeah. Okay, good. So I say, yes, we are. And the sergeant major then, so the meth sergeant major's in there. So the meth sergeant, that was Green, Sergeant Major Green, who eventually went to the Marine Corps. Sergeant Major Marine Corps. He's in that meeting. And the command master chief. Did y'all know the meth has a command master chief? Y'all know? Okay, good. So both of them are in there, and the sergeant major says, right, but we're not a treatment facility. And the GAO then says to them, right, but if we throw people out and they can't even get help, they can't even go to the VA. And that was the end of the topic. Because at least me and the sergeant major understood, even though we put people out, we still have a responsibility after we put them out. Okay, we're not going to go that too deep right now. So, in the case of this young Marine, I used to tell this story. Well, I tell this story, what I just told you, and the meth surgeon. Well, let me back up. About 3 years ago, some lieutenant colonel pulled me off to the side and said, you shouldn't tell that story because it makes the Marine Corps look bad. The stuff about this young Marine, because I would tell it. He had NCOs in there. Nobody knew enough about TBI. He had staff NCOICs. He had an OIC. There was a CO and XO, both at the battalion and the regiment, and none of them knew enough to figure out maybe this kid should be in treatment rather than being run up the flagpole. That happened at Camp Lejeune and at Camp Pendleton. So some colonel pulls me off and said, I don't know if that's a good idea to tell that story like that because you make the Marine Corps look bad. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, yeah, I probably need to get somebody to okay that. So I called Sergeant Major Green up. At this point, he's Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and the Sergeant Major tells me, tell the truth. He said, what are they going to do, make you retire again? That's exactly what he said. Master goes, look, what are they going to do, make you retire again? Just let me back up, because there's more to that. He says, give me a couple of days, and I'll get back with you. So I'm assuming that meant he was going to talk to the Commandant about whether I can say this kind of stuff out loud. And he said, yeah, just tell the truth. So that's why I tell this. So I told this story at that meeting at Camp Pendleton for Brain Injury Awareness Month. And the meth surgeon then pulled me up to the side and said, I need you to change that story. I want you to add something to it. And the part he wanted me to add was, he said, my medical officers and my battalion commanders, they need this training to be relevant. And I looked at him, what do you mean? He says, we all know there aren't that many combat-related TBI stories. In other words, we're not having that many combat-related TBIs, other than people just now reporting their TBI from years ago. So what he was saying was, tell some garrison-related stories, because I had already spoke to Captain Swanson about this stuff I'm observing. Tell stories that makes it relevant today for the medical officers, why they need to know this, and the battalion commanders, why they need to get this training. Tell stories like that. Now, up until a year ago, I didn't really have those stories, but about a year ago, I began doing the new patient orientation at our Intrepid Spirit Center on Camp Pendleton. Anybody been there to visit yet? If you haven't been, you should come visit. However, your next step would be Naval Hospital San Diego. And however, you can refer people to the Intrepid Spirit Center if you want, but you really should come visit if you haven't. Did you get to visit them? So any of y'all, just pick up the phone, contact me, and I'll get you a quick tour. So about a year ago, almost 18 months now, I began doing the new patient orientation. What that means is every patient that you send to us, they got to come through me first. And part of my intake, I asked the question, what happened to you and why are you here? Oh, let's back up. The reason we do the new patient orientation is to kind of orientate them to what they need to know about TBIs, and then what the clinic is going to do, what their potential for recovery is, rehabilitation, to kind of make them feel comfortable, because what we've learned is, first of all, most people aren't going to report their TBIs in the first place. Second, those that you even tell have a TBI, and then you get them a referral to us. Now, maybe not you. Are you guys referring to Intrepid Spirit? Anybody?
Yeah, we have a lot of people live in Oceanside. Right. And so it really depends. I've been able to get people in the both, just based off of where they live.
San Diego and Intrepid Spirit. Perfect. So what was I going to say? So you refer them to us, and I asked what happened, and now I'm going to tell you 3 stories that really are even better than the one I just told you, that makes this even more relevant. I kind of lost my thought, but I'll get back in a moment. So here's the first one. Young Marine shows up at work with a black eye. Well, that's not unusual. They're in the Marines. Now let me add to it. She walks around the command with a black eye for about 2 or 3 days. Now we have a problem. What's the problem? She has a black eye. People don't want to know what happened, right, ma'am? So eventually that gets to the sergeant major, and they figure out it was a boyfriend beat her up. Boyfriend's in the Marine Corps. He's a sergeant too. So we have a big problem now. Somebody is in trouble, right? So he was taken care of. However, nobody considered you got hit in the eye hard enough to have a TBI. Nothing ever happened. So she then starts going to medical about migraines. After this, she's reporting to medical about migraines. Apparently the doc over at Pendleton didn't figure it out either. So gave her aspirin for whatever he gave her. Well, she tells me, yeah, they gave me the aspirins for like 3 weeks, but my headaches never went away. Then I started my memory. Well, she said my memory wasn't that good, and I was not able to focus that good. So I said, so how did you eventually wind up in here? What was it that got you in here? Now, this isn't the way this was supposed to happen, but it was good. She said, well, I was complaining to my master guns. that I don't feel good all the time and I have headaches. Oh, she needed to run PT, and she didn't want to run PT, and she's complaining to the Master Guns that she has these issues, and the Master Guns remembers, tell me what happened when you got into a fight, because the Master Guns had been to TBI training. So he knew something. And she tells him this. Well, she's telling me this. I said, well, I told him what happened. So what happened? She said, well, we were in a fight. He punched me in my eye, and I think I was knocked out. I said, so what do you mean you think? When I woke up, he was gone. Well, then you got knocked out. I mean, if you wake up and realize it's over and it's gone, you must have been knocked out. So now we know we have a potential TBI with loss of consciousness. Nobody put any of that together. So she walks around the command for 3 weeks before ever going to medical. And then when she went to medical did not put it together for another week before they referred her to the clinic. Okay, let me give you a better story. So this Marine is sitting in the new patient orientation, and his story is this. I was at McMath's training. So I asked, what happened? I was at McMath's training. When I got slammed to the ground, I hit my head. Okay, so what happened? Said I was a little dazed and disoriented. I said, okay, what happened? I said, well, the gunny made me sit off for a few minutes. And after I thought I felt better, he brought me back in, and we, continued what we were doing. I said, so then what happened? He said, well, I slammed down again, and I got knocked out. And I said, okay, so what happened after that? He said, well, a few moments later, the corpsman showed up, and I was awake then, and they sat me off to the side, and he said that I would be okay. It gets worse. Later on that week, she's complaining of all these problems to the command that she's claiming she's having, and nobody's putting it together until they refer her to behavioral health. There's more to the story. I'm not going to go that deep, but she's having these behavioral health types of looking problems. She's complaining of anxiety, depression, and stuff like that. Those are TBI symptoms. And so the medical officer refers her to behavioral health. She's at behavioral health for maybe a month before behavioral health refers her to the clinic. Now I know whenever I get people in the clinic that tells me I was referred here from behavioral health, that tells me, well, first it tells me the behavioral health people, that was probably somebody that had TBI training and knew enough to think, maybe you have a TBI. But then it makes me also think, well, where were the corpsmen and the medical people, especially when their incident is so clearly TBI related, and nobody addressed it back at the BAS. Okay, one more story. I got to tell 2 more stories. Then we're going to get going. So this Marine, I don't even know if this is funny or not. So, no, this is not funny. So the JAG from 32nd Street calls me up, and she says, hey, can a TBI cause a sailor to rob a 7-Eleven? Okay, let me go back. That's not the one I want to do. This is the fun part. We're going to cover the sailor robbing a 7-Eleven, though. Did I tell that story? Okay, so this story here, I get to see firsthand. I get to observe this. I'm out at the Camp Pendleton track running when they're playing soccer. There's a soccer game going on, and I see a player. Well, there's a play evolving. Player is running out. The goalie is running. The player is running. The goalie is running out. The goalie dives to get the ball, gets kneed in the head. Bam, kneed in the head. The player grabs his knee and he's yelling, ah! The goalie grabs his head and he's rolling on the ground. I think he's choking. He's rolling on the ground, yelling a couple of things. I'm only going to tell you one first. He's yelling, ah! Did he have a concussion or TBI? Oh, you guys are smart. So the answer is, we don't know yet. Everybody say we don't know yet. Yeah. And you're going to learn why you don't know in a moment. Then he's yelling this. What else he's yelling is, excuse me, he's yelling, what happened? What happened? What happened? Did he have a TBI? The answer to that is yes. Why do we know? You're going to learn in a moment how that clearly tells us he had a TBI. But what happens next is, I'm standing there watching. Now, I'm not a clinical person, I'm just an educator. So I'm standing around to see what's going to happen because I train all the coaches. All the coaches at Camp Pendleton get TBI training from me. And they know, in the case of a TBI, they know what they're trained on what they're supposed to do. So I'm waiting to see what the coach does. And somebody then gets on their knee. I see somebody on a knee, and they're talking to this person. So I go out to see what they're saying. I'm standing kind of about the distance from me to you next to him, and I hear him say, I want you to go to medical in the morning and get a Macy valve. So I figured that's got to be a medical guy. So I go over and I said, hey, are you a medical person? He looks up and said, yeah, Dr. Perrin. So that told me he knew who I was. I said, so have you been to TBI training? He said, yes. I said, you need to send that person to medical now. To medical now. So they help the guy up. They have to help the guy up. They have to help him off the field. He is not in good shape. I see him sit him down. They take his cleats off of him. And when I realized that was like that, when I get back around, I tell the corpsman, hey, doc, and I want you to contact me tomorrow and let me know what happens. So he calls me tomorrow, the next day, and he tells me the BAS was closed. Well, I guess you closed. You closed at what time?
16.
I didn't know that. So the BAS was closed, so they took him to the emergency room. They sent him to the emergency room. What did the emergency room do, doc? No, not yet. Not yet. They did a scan, they did a CT scan, and didn't see anything that would indicate any problem. So what did they do? Say it again? Sent him home. They said, you should be okay, you're okay. They sent him home. So he gets back to the command, and over the next 3 weeks, he's having emotional issues, behavioral issues, things like that. This is what he's telling me in the clinic now. And they finally send him to behavioral health, and the behavioral health people immediately figure out, no, you need to be in TBI or concussion treatment. Now, why do I tell you those stories? All of those are stories where somebody didn't know enough about TBI. Because every one of those cases, there was a point when somebody should have immediately been thinking, in spite of all the other stuff you have to do, there is something that cues you, we have TBI issues. And that should direct where you're going to go. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. It's just going to tell you you have TBI issues. So, does everybody understand why this is so important now? If you got it, say I got it. So let me tell you the petty officer first class story. So now you still don't know enough, but the JAG calls up, wants to know, can the TBI cause a sailor to rob a 7-Eleven? What's the answer? Now, I can't tell her that because I don't know enough, right? So I say, tell me more. So she tells me the rest of the story. Yeah, the defense counsel is going to use the TBI defense. I said, so what's the case? She says, well, he robbed the 7-Eleven in uniform with his name tag with a toy pistol and claims it wasn't him. So I said, well, does he want to get out? Maybe he's just trying to find a mental case way. No, he's trying to stay in. That's really crazy. So what else? So why do we think he had a TBI? He's on a submarine, he falls down the ladder well. Fell down the ladder well, and the defense counsel, the lieutenant commander, she says, yeah, and they claimed he was probably unconscious there for at least 3 or 4 hours before someone found him. We have a problem. So she was looking for an expert witness, and I can't do that. I'm just a contractor. So I have to go get Dr. Paul Sargent, well, at that time it was Dr. Sargent. Who knows Dr. Sargent? So he was the concussion care clinic director at that time, Paul Sargent.
He'll be coming down.
Yay. He is now, he just left the concussion care clinic. He is now MLG, the psych at MLG. So what's he coming down to help with?
Because we don't have any psych.
Oh, well, yeah, that answers that. So he had to go talk to them about that case. So the answer to the question, though, is, yeah, you injure the right part of your brain. It can interfere with your ability to manage your judgment, control behavior, all kinds of things you're going to learn in a moment. I got to tell one last story, just to make sure you got, this is another, this is great for you guys. So I got a major sitting in the clinic. Oh, I got to back up. This major attends the same training the lieutenant was at back in March. And at the end of the training, the major learns all the TBI symptoms. You got to get this, doc. This is what you should have figured out. So the major understands TBI symptoms. And he pulls me off to the side at the end of the meeting. I said, I have all these symptoms. And I think I might have had a TBI. I said, what makes you think? Man, I was in a vehicle rollover. Well, what happened? He said, oh, it was on a weekend. I was in an accident. And then he's trying to let me know he didn't tell anybody. So he messed up right there. Y'all know what I mean, right? You can't be in a vehicle accident and be the XO and not tell the CO or tell somebody. So he didn't say anything, and he didn't know how to handle this. So this is crazy. What happens next? He gets relieved. He gets relieved from command because the staff turns him in for making bad judgment calls. In other words, he's doing stuff that his staff, his enlisted staff, figures out something's wrong with the XO. This is not right. And they bring it to the CO's attention. They remove him from command. And now he's trying to see what he can do about the TBI stuff. And I tell him, oh, he gets relieved of command, gets a letter of punitive, what do you call that? Punitive?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's like it stays with you with your command.
Yes. So that's where the command writes a letter because of your bad behavior, and they told him, they were forcing him to retire. Luckily, he could get to retire. So now he's asking me, what can he do? Well, first thing, if you're going to use the TBI case, you're going to have to tell. And you're going to have to decide whether you want to roll with you didn't tell the command you had a TBI, or you was in a car accident, or you want to use the TBI defense against this other stuff. And he decided to go down the road that he was going to use the TBI thing. So he tells me, yeah, what can I do? I said, well, first you need to go back to your medical officer and you need to tell the whole story. And fortunately, I know the medical officer that they were at had been through the same training you were at. So I knew he knew enough about TBI. And sure enough, maybe 2 months later, the major is sitting in the concussion care clinic now to get the more advanced TBI stuff and to ask me, can somebody write a letter? Now, I can't write a letter. I'm a contractor. But I take him to see Dr. Sargent. And they apparently have a discussion, and I'm assuming Dr. Sargent agreed that the major's behavioral issues were TBI related, because maybe 2 months later, I see the major again, he tells me they removed the letter of punitive damage, punitive reprimand. In other words, the letter that they wrote saying this stuff, they removed that from his case. The Marine Corps removed that, but they still said you have to retire. In other words, now that what you're going to learn here is the stuff you need to know to be able to figure out maybe the way you're a Marine, maybe one of the reasons people are doing some of the stupid stuff they're doing is maybe it's TBI related. And then maybe it's not. All right, did I beat that up enough? If I beat it up enough, say move on. Move on. You didn't move your lips, sir. Oh, okay. Okay.